The next thing I want to have a look at is question 9. And I want to look at question 9 solely to remind you of how a two-way table works. You can see one drawn out, or a type of two-way table drawn out on page 190, which is what question 9 refers to. I am going to draw one out here, and I'm going to show you writing out some of it, and then I'm going to come back when it's finished. So question 9, 2 unbiased dice are thrown using the sample space given in example 3 of this section. Find the probability that, and it asks you a bunch of questions. So you can see in example 3 on page 190, if 2 dice are thrown and the score is added, set out a sample space given the possible outcomes. So it shows you the sample space for the possible outcomes. And for those of you who've forgotten from Junior Cert, the sample space is the list of all possible outcomes. And it is a set. So if you're asked to write out the sample space in a list form, you must put it written like a set with our curly brackets and commas in between each. More than likely you'll have to do a sample space or a tree diagram instead. So I want to do drawing out the two-way table for the sample space in question 9 to show you or remind you how it is that works. So I'm going to start drawing it out, and then I'm going to come back when I am finished. So I write out and say this is dice 1, D1, 1, and this is D2. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 as my possible outcomes for my first dice, and I have 1. You drew all this out a little bit neater. I'm doing the best that I can here. 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. My possible outcomes on my second dice. Now, what it tells you to do is add them up. The other word that they will use in a question like this is total. So what is the total result? And what they mean is add up your answers. So here, in this result, I got a 1 and a 1 on both dice. So that's going to be 1 plus 1 is going to equal 2 is going to be my result here. Here I would have 2 plus 1 would have been my outcome, so I would end up with 3. Here I'd have 3 plus 1 would be 4, and so on. And I'm going to come back when I have filled in the table. And we're back. So I have filled in my table now, and you will notice that the numbers keep going up by 1 here. So if you're trying to fill in a table like this in the exam, it doesn't take terribly long. You have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 here, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 here. That's how it works for an addition table like this. Be careful, don't use that shorthand automatically, because they could just as easily ask you to multiply your different outcomes instead of add them or get the total of them. Now, let's have a look at the questions they ask you in question 9. 2 unbiased dice are thrown using the sample space to find the probability that the total is 10. So the total is what I have written in my sample space here. These are my outcomes, these are my totals. So I have a total of 36 possible outcomes. And the probability, part 1, probability of getting a 10 is going to be the number of ways that I can get a 10 divided by the total number of possible outcomes. So I have a 10 here, a 10 here, and a 10 here. So I have 3 ways of getting a 10 out of a total of 36 possible outcomes, which leaves me with a probability of a 12th. And in part 2, we're asked about the probability both numbers are odd. So both odd. I'm going to write down odd. So this isn't actually asking for outcomes, this is asking for our input numbers. So what numbers are odd? Both numbers are odd for this number here. 1 and 1 were our inputs here. 1 and 3 are our inputs here. So I'm going to change color. odd here for both of them. I have an odd for both here. I have an odd for both here. Try and do this systematically, so go down in columns. I have 1 and 1 here. I have 1 and 3 here, 1 and 5 here. 2 isn't going to include any of them, so 3 and 1, 3 and 3, 3 and 5. 4 can't include any of them. 5 would be 5 and 1, 5 and 3, 5 and 5. So both numbers are odd. We can't have 6 as one of them because 6 is already an even number. So I mark on my table all of my numbers. Do not do this in your head. Then count up your outcomes that we're interested in. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I have 9 total outcomes that meet my criteria out of a total of 36 possible outcomes. And I end up with a quarter when I simplify my fraction. Write this first, don't just write a quarter. The reason being, if you happen to make a mistake in simplifying, you get 0 marks if you just write down something wrong. If you write down something a little bit correct, that the examiner can see where you are coming from, you can get attempt marks. A wrong answer without any justification is just a wrong answer and gets 0 marks. Now, find the probability that in part 3 the total is 4 or less. 4 or less. So total of 4 or less. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are 6 outcomes that meet that criteria or less. So 6 outcomes out of a total of 36. So we have probability of a sixth. So you just use your table to count up your outcomes. IV. Find the probability that the total is odd and greater than 6. So it must be both odd and greater than 6. So what outcomes are odd and greater than 6? Well, greater than 6 means we're past this point in the table, and odd numbers after that. So we have 7s that are odd and greater than 6. We have 9s are odd and they're greater than 6. We have 11s are odd and they're greater than 6. So I've marked it on the table. I didn't mark the previous one because I didn't want this to get too cluttered on you, but you absolutely can mark it in on your table. Now, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There are 12 outcomes that meet my criteria for being both odd and greater than 6. Odd and greater than 6. Again, tell yourself the story of what you're doing so you can keep track of these. That's 12 possible outcomes out of a total of 36, and that simplifies down to a third. And that's what we need to be able to do with our two-way tables. This is not the only version of a two-way table they can ask you to do. They could ask you to write the outcomes, like here would be 1, 1. This would be 2, 1. That's the traditional two-way table that you did in first year. This is an adding up two-way table, and you could also be asked about a multiplying two-way table or a subtraction one, whatever they ask you to do in the question.